Every Farthing Publications presents My Life as a Boy, narrated by William Ireland. My Life as a Boy. From the above title, please do not think I am transgender, transsexual, or trans anything. I was born a male and always will be. I love the freedom of being able to pee standing up. When I was 11 years old, I was lucky enough to meet a man who treated me with great kindness and affection. I was out riding my bike one day when I saw him working on the old farmhouse he and his wife just purchased. The house was located far enough from my parents' place where I lived as to not be considered a neighbor. I had seen the man before because my dad owned a small business that brought people to our house. The fact that I lived in a very small town in rural New England also made it easy to know the man's name. If you have never lived or visited a town like I just described, you may not understand how fast word of mouth can spread information. As I rode my bike down his driveway, he looked up and seemed to recognize me. When I got close enough, he asked me what I was doing so far from home. I guess when you're old, 3 or 4 miles on a bike is a long way to travel. My bike was my ticket to the wider world. I loved being on the road. The freedom of what went along with a banana seat, 2 wheels, and a sissy bar was like heaven to me. I told him I was hot and thirsty and was wondering if I could get a drink of water. He got down from his ladder and said he needed a break anyway, so why not? He had a cooler on the back of his pickup truck and went and got us each an ice-cold drink. He sat down on the tailgate of his truck and I sat on my bike. We chatted about the nice weather and about the house he was working on. It was a typical old farmhouse in need of much repair. After I finished my drink, I just sat listening and talking with him. It was strange to me that he seemed to care about and listen to what I was saying. I felt awkward because I knew I had no real reason for being there. I didn't want to leave either. He may have seen that I was uncomfortable because his next question was, "Would you mind giving me a hand before you leave?" I was just thrilled that he wanted my help. I jumped off my bike and said, "Sure, what do you need me to do?" He said he was putting up an eave board and needed me to hold one end while he got it nailed into place. I helped him for an hour or so and then told him I had to get home for lunch. The ride was incredible. Never had my bike pedaled so easily or gone so fast. I had no idea why I felt the way I did. I just knew it was a great day. I kept thinking about how he listened when I talked and he asked me for help. I felt useful and important. I wasn't just the kid up the street or so-and-so's little brother. I was a helper. I could do things that were useful to a man. Seldom since have I had such a feeling. Maybe it's because for the first time I felt someone needed me. What I do know is I changed that day. No longer was I just a kid. I grew up and I knew it. Life for me was not going to be the same. I had turned a corner and was more alive because of it. From here on, out of respect and for protection, I will refer to my friend as James. For obvious reasons, I cannot use his real name. I waited a few days and then rode my bike back to his end of town. With only one road through the town, there was a north end of town and a south end of town. I lived in the north, James in the south. I was really disappointed when he wasn't outside. I'd looked forward to helping him again and just thought he would be there building away. His truck was in the driveway, but I couldn't see him. It took me a few minutes, but after a while I got up nerve to go knock on the door. When he opened the door, he looked almost as happy as I felt. Any fear or apprehension left my mind and body without any haste. He grinned at me and asked if I needed another drink of water. I felt a little stupid then because I hadn't thought of any reason to be there. He had no way of knowing that being there made me happy. Nothing else was said as to why I was there. He just invited me in. I knew from the conversations he had had with my dad that he worked nights at the paper mill nearby. When he told me he had just finished working on the house for the day, my heart sank. All I wanted to do was hang out with him and help him repair something. From my first visit, I knew he had a lot of knowledge about fixing things. That day was not going to be like the first day, and I'm sure my sadness showed through. He told me he had to leave soon, but that I could rest there until he left for work. I sat at the kitchen table watching him make his lunch pail up for the night. Trying to make conversation, I asked him where his wife was, and he told me she had a job too and was gone every day. I told him I thought it was strange that a man would make a lunch for himself. The mother always made my dad's lunch. He smiled, but it didn't seem to be offended by what I said. If I thought my life had taken a turn 3 days ago, it was about to make an about face. James told me he had started working on the bathroom and that he had no water in there, so he was going to shave at the table. As he got a small basin of hot water ready, along with the old-fashioned lather brush and razor, I started panting like a dog. I hid it the best I could, but for some reason I was really excited about watching him shave. At this point, I must tell you about the dirty magazines, as my mother called them. My grandfather had given some old issues to my dad, and I found them hidden under my parents' mattress one day. After sneaking a few looks at them, I realized I liked the ones that had pictures of men in them. There weren't many, and it was always the girl parts that the photos were focused on. But there were one or two that showed men with erections. The pictures were up close and personal, and I liked them. As I watched James lather up his face and get the razor ready, they were scary in those days. I started thinking what he would look like if he was in the dirty picture book. I tried not to think about it, but as he stroked the shave cream off his face, my fantasies just took over. I was staring at him in utter fascination. I had never watched a man shave like that before, and certainly never thought about what he would look like naked in a picture book. I was too young to ejaculate, but I'm pretty sure I came in my pants, so to speak. My mind was going places it had never been before. On the ride home, I was really mad at myself. James had done nothing but be nice to me, and I wanted to do bad things with him. It didn't seem fair. If he ever found out what I was thinking, he would hate me. I didn't know much about the whole sex thing, but being the youngest of 6 children, I had heard enough to know I was one sick fucking child. With what I knew about adults at that time, I was convinced James already knew what I was thinking. He knew my little penis got rock hard, and that I had that funny tickle down there that happens when you and a friend monkey around in the treehouse. I felt I could never go back. I had ruined everything. I was going to hell, and I knew it. When I was watching him shave and having the thoughts, it didn't seem bad. I didn't want to hurt James. As a matter of fact, while my mind was seeing naked pictures of him, I felt it would be like loving him, only different. What I also didn't understand was, if he knew what I was thinking, why did he say it was nice seeing me again? Why did he tell me he could use a hand the next day holding the copper pipe in position while he soldered it? The next day, my mom was going to town. At that point in time, going to town was a big deal. It meant getting on your school clothes, washing your face, and combing your hair. Not the most important things to an 11-year-old. I had other plans. Things were different now. I was grown up and someone wanted my help. I don't know why my parents hadn't seen the changes that had taken place in their little boy, and I wasn't about to tell them. I told my mother I was planning to go play baseball with Shirley. Shirley was the town tomboy. She was tough and could spit better than any of the rest of the gang. As parents do, Mother had to throw a monkey wrench into my plans. This included taking the trash to the dump. In those days, you just picked a corner of your 70-acre farm and used it as a dump. There was no curbside pickup or recycling. I also had to get the lawn mowed. There was a small amount of whining, but I didn't want my mother to say I had to go to town, so I raced through my chores. Mom left before I finished the lawn. I knew I was going to be in trouble and have to re-mow the grass. You can't run with the lawnmower and think you're going to get a good job done. Needless to say, I didn't stop at the ball diamond. I rode as fast and hard as I could to James's house. Any thoughts about how evil I must be disappeared overnight, and I was only a little concerned him knowing what I had been thinking the day before. Just as I got to the driveway, a car was pulling out. This nice lady stopped and told me she was James's wife and that I must be Little Billy. To this day I hate family nicknames. I said I was, and she thanked me for being such a big help to her and her husband. The driveway seemed 10 miles long that day. Meeting James's wife brought back floods of yesterday's memories. What was I going to do? How could I tell him I didn't mean to have those bad thoughts? They just happened. By the time I got done scuffing my feet and dawdling around, James was already at the door waiting for me. I hung my head and walked to the door. He greeted me as if things were just great, and there was no scolding me for thinking bad things. I was sure he was just waiting for the right time to yell at me and tell me he hated me and never come near his house again. The longer I waited, the worse it got. Strange thing is, he never did yell at me. Finally, he took hold of my shoulders, squat down so he could look me in the eyes, and asked what was wrong with me. To this day, I don't know how I kept from bursting into tears because that's all I wanted to do, cry and run. I told him I was a bad kid, and if he knew what I was really like, he would hate me. At that point, the smile went from his face, and that serious adult look that I had seen 100 times but still didn't understand replaced it. James took me to the kitchen table and we sat down. He told me he didn't think I was old enough to be really bad, and that he couldn't think of any reason that would ever make him hate me. It took a long time, but I was able to tell him about my thoughts and that I wanted to touch him. I'm not sure where "I want to touch you" part came from, but I said it and I couldn't take it back. All he said was, "That is serious stuff and I'll have to think about it." He got me a snack and went back to work. I sat at the table thinking that the world didn't come crashing down and he didn't yell at me. Over the next 2 weeks, James and I only got to see each other a few times. He had to work a shutdown at the mill, and I had family stuff to do. His not freaking out did make me more brave. Every time I did get to see him, I would ask him if he had thought about it. His response was always the same. "That's serious stuff. I need to think about it." My being the kid I was, my comeback was, "It's just for fun. It's no big deal or anything." Deep in my heart, though, I was a little hurt that he didn't feel the same way. Once I said it out loud, fear went away from me and was replaced by desire. The big day came Not unlike any other time, I would pedal my skinny little ass to his place. We were working under the house on some plumbing stuff. James was laying on his back working, and I was holding the flashlight. At one point, he had to spread his legs to get leverage on a piece of pipe he was trying to move. I just reached out and put my hand on his crotch. He stopped for a second, but didn't pull away. After he got the pipe moved, he looked at me. I started laughing and said, "I bet mine's bigger than yours." I already knew that wasn't true, but I didn't know what else to say. James just told me we'd see about that later, but for now we needed to make sure the water in the bathroom worked. For the first time, I was really mad at James. I had been the one to tell about my secret thoughts. I was the one who wanted to cry when I couldn't see him. I was the one who held his stupid boards and pipes in position while he fixed them. Why was he more concerned about the water running than about my feelings? We were in a little secret hiding place where no one could see us, and all he wanted to know was did the solder hold. I didn't hide my anger well, and we got out from under the house, and were dusting each other off. I hit him a lot harder than I needed to. I was mad, and I wanted him to know it. My little tantrum continued into the house, where I threw myself into the chair and made a huffing noise. James proceeded to the bathroom to check the water flow. I was really pissed then. Because of the remodeling, there was no door on the bathroom. When James walked out, I knew he was there, but I wouldn't look at him. I could tell he was just standing there, looking at me, and I was a little ashamed for being an ass to him. Again, he had never done anything but be nice to me. I was being the jerk, and I knew it. All James said to me at that time was, "Do you really know what you're doing?" As I turned and looked at him, I realized his pants were unbuttoned, and the zipper was undone. His white briefs were showing a little, and I couldn't take my eyes off them. I told him I did understand what was going on, and it is what I wanted. When he stepped closer to me, I reached out and took hold of the elastic band around his waist and pulled it down. He was not erect, and he did not look like the pictures I had seen in the magazine. He had, what he later explained to me, was a foreskin. I didn't have one of those, and I found it wonderfully exciting. As that first summer went on, James and I spent as much time together as we could. He worked hard at teaching me how to measure and cut things. What I liked about these times was when James would stand behind me and put his arms around me. He would hold my hand and show me how to accurately guide the tool through the material I was cutting. Sometimes it was a handsaw, other times a pipe cutting tool. I really felt close to him when he would do that. During the sex times, I would use my hands and mouth to make him feel close to me. A couple of times I pretended I was a little puppy dog and just licked him. It didn't matter if it was his neck, arms, or his private parts. He smelled and tasted wonderful to me. We only got to fool around 4 or 5 times that summer. With my being a young boy, we were very limited as to how much time I could spend there. I still was not ready or willing to tell my parents what James meant to me. If they couldn't see the changes and growth that had taken place in me, I felt it wasn't my responsibility to tell them. Don't get me wrong, they were great parents. My mom was a wonderful woman, and my dad was involved with my life as much as any dad at that time and place. They did all they could for me, and I had it much better than a lot of young people. I was well fed, had clean clothes, and a warm, loving house to live in. I had more and bigger toys than all of my siblings. I just knew that things were different for me. At a very young age, my mother and I were talking one night as she sat there knitting me a pair of wool socks. She looked up from her knitting and told me I scare her because I didn't think like the rest of her kids. She called me a deep thinker. Summer, fall, winter, spring, they all came and went. My life was so typical that there was very little to tell. School, Christmas, birthdays, those were the important things to me. I turned 12, and when school got out for summer vacation, it gave me time to spend with James. At some point in time, I had heard about men going inside other men. I really wanted to try this, and we did once. I didn't like it that much because I couldn't look at James. I wanted to see him have fun with me. My favorite thing to do was to get fully naked and get in bed. What made this so great was two things. One, I got to play the puppy dog game and lick all over him. The other was, there were the times James would rub me all over and have me lay on him. Kissing his neck and having my little hard penis pushing against his belly made me sweat. It was the end of that summer that I learned what real heartache felt like. Sex was never the dominating factor in my relationship with James. I wanted to fool around a lot more than he did, but I just liked being with him. He knew so much about construction and getting things to work that it was like being at school all the time, except it was fun. Like any kid who hears his dad tell the same joke all the time, I got tired of hearing, "Plumbing's easy, boy. Just remember, shit flows downhill." What I really didn't want to hear was the day James told me we couldn't do the sex thing anymore. I don't recall his exact words, but something to effect, "This just isn't right," or "This isn't normal." I was crushed. Our friendship, seemed so normal and great to me that I didn't understand why he felt that way. My suffering didn't come from the hands of an abuser. My suffering came from the words of a man who feared for my well-being. I kept telling him I was okay with things and nothing needed to change. Change did come, and even my begging wouldn't get him to monkey around with me. It happened once or twice after the big talk, but it was never the same. I grew up and moved away from my small New England town. I had boyfriends and girlfriends, long-term relationships, and short-term flings. I had fun jobs, bad jobs, and high-paying jobs. At the age of 30, I married a wonderful woman, and a few years later had an even more wonderful son. We moved back to my hometown, and I built a house with my own hands. During that period, I thought many times about all the things James had taught me, like do it right the first time, or remember that shit flows downhill, or plumbing sucks but it isn't hard. He was right about a lot of things. There are 10,000 therapists out there who would still say I was a victim at the hands of an abuser. I was not. I have every reason in the world to give in to what I have been told and put all my problems on James. But James was not the problem. I was there. I know what happened, and I know how I felt. Maybe I'm the only boy in the world that had a loving, caring relationship with an adult man, but I doubt it. This is a true story, and all I'm asking is for you to realize that you are being fed a bunch of crap when you are told intergenerational relationships are always bad. They are not always bad, and I'm living proof. James is still married, has grown children and even grandchildren. I see him occasionally, even though he has since sold the old farmhouse and moved to a nearby town. Again, rural New England life. We have only talked about our 2 summers together once as adults. I was going through some hardships a few years ago and wanted him to understand I in no way blamed him. He had given me something that no one can ever take away, and I wanted him to know that.